So in today's video, we are going to discuss about the interview questions which were asked many times for your interviews. Like, what is the difference between where, let, and const? The most common question which will be asking at the beginning of their interview, right? So we are going to discuss all of that in this video, and also some examples which elaborate your how the let, where, and const works, and also with the code which we will be doing it here online compiler. And also we are also begin our join video from the here. And let's start with what is the main what is the let, where, and const. What are the difference between all of them? So mainly where has a functional scope. So if we are going to check that here where has a functional scope, right? Functional scope. What it does means, if I define here function called func, and if I define where a is equal to 10 right here. Now if I want to check that I am going to log that a inside this function, then it works, right? It works. But what if I want to access that a outside of that function? So it is possible to access that a variable that outside of this function. Let's check using controller. Now I am going to compiler give me error that a is not defined, right? So where has a function scope, so I am only able to access this a variable inside this function. Otherwise I am not able to access this a variable outside of that function. So where has a functional scope, what it that means is this. But let's check a second scenario. I copy this and paste it here. Let's create a block scope. So mainly what is block scope? Mainly this is a block called block. So it is some kind of block which we are defining some content in between of these two curly braces. These are scope, right? Is this called block scope, right? It's a block scope. Now if tell me, now I am able to access this a variable outside of this block scope. Let's check using this compiler. Now yes, I am doing very well, and I am also getting that a variable value outside of this block scope. So here block scope, what it does, mainly I am able to access a, where a outside of that block scope, right? But I am not able to access where outside of functional scope, functional scope. This called functional scope, right? So I'm not able to access this a variable outside of this functional scope, but I am able to access this a variable outside of this block scope. So where does this of things? So I'm just commenting this, and let's check our second variable, that is data type. Let's check our let data type. What it does, if I define let a is equal to here 10, let's suppose 10. Now it's a block scope, right? So I am here, I define this a variable at the top level of my code, right? So if I want to access this let a inside this block, let's suppose now here below I call a function called function. Okay, sorry. Now if I want to access that law a let a here inside the functional component, functional scope, let's check I'm getting the value or not. After running we are checking that, because how it knows you key how things works, right? I call this one. Now let's check here I am able to access both in block scope also, in functional scope also. So this is a called block scope. If I define that a at the top level of my code and I want to access that a in block scope, so I am also able to access that a variable in block scope and also as well as in functional scope. So let provides you this functionality to everywhere you can access that a variable. But what if I want, I just moved that let a inside the block scope, right? So now if I want to access that a which I defined in that block scope in that functional component, so what if I just use enter and run my project? So I'm not able to access that a variable because a let has a function like block scope. So here I define that block and also define that let a variable inside that block. So I am not able to access this a outside of this block, right? So this is a functional scope, but let has a block scope. So I am only access this a in that block scope, not from the outside. I'm able to access that a, right? So const let you some things like this. If I use const and let are both as like block scope variables, we can use same as like that. If I want to use that a inside this block scope and also in functional scope, so let's check how it works. It is not going to be give error. It works because let and const both are same, both are block scope. But what if I just move that const a variable inside that block? What happened here? Let's check. Now I am getting error because it's a const as a block scope, right? So I'm only access that const a variable inside that block, not in functional component. But let's suppose if I want to access that a in functional component, so I'm only able to access that const a if I define that a variable in that function. So I'm able to access that. But here I define that block scope. I need to comment this. After that we will be checking. Okay, so now inside the functional component I'm getting the value, right? But what if I define that at the top level? Now it is the top level. So it consider like whole things from the here to here, right? End of the code. So it takes everything. Means it supposed to be thinking ki, here is my opening curly braces, here is my closing curly braces, right? So it takes whole thing. It's a called global scope, right? It takes by default global scope. So I am able to access this a inside block scope as well as in functional scope, right? So if I give enter, then I am able to access both, right? So it called also if we define that let and const at the top level of our code, without inside any block, without inside any function, so it called global, right? It called global scope. What? So here is the difference between let, where and const. Let's re-memorizing our concept which we were learning, right? So basically let and const both are the same thing, that has block scope. But if we define that at the top level of our code and any without any like curly braces, any functional component without inside any curly braces and like block scope and a functional scope, at the top level we define that is considering that global scope. It has global scope, so everyone can like access that const a variable, and const like block scope is also accessible, and also functional scope also accessible variable a, because it's global scope. We haven't merged uh, stored in between of any block scope or any functional scope, right? So it can be accessed in also in block scope and also functional scope. So basically let and const both are same, but main thing is what is the difference between let and const. Let me create a new thing here. It's comment out. So what is the difference between let and const, right? We need to check. So mainly let a is equal to suppose 10, I take a 10, right? Const b is equal to 20. Now if I created a function called new, okay. Now if I want to change the value of a to, let's suppose 1000, right? Now I want to check that a value. value inside the new function, right? Now I to check like this, and also after this I also want to put my console log here to check that a value. I just copy this and paste it here, and now after the new function, now what would you supposed to think? When I just click on its enter, now the my a becomes, okay, sorry, we need to call this function first. I forget to call my functions. No worries. Okay, what happened? Okay, I forgot to put comma here. No worries. Now it works. Let's check. What is the layer? What is the thing which we are facing? Okay, okay, now it works. Let's check. Now the a value inside the new function is becomes 1000 because we define that 10 to 1000, right? So now the a value is become 1000 from 10 to 1000, right? So now the a value is 1000 from the here. Now when someone want to access that a variable, if here Joy want to check the variable value, right? So now Jai getting the value of 1000, but Vignesh defined that value. Suppose, let's take an example. Vignesh defined that value at the cost of 10, but someone else that change it in the future of that inside a function. If Nimesh, right? Nimesh changed the value from 10 to 1000, let's suppose. Now if Jai want to access the value of a or access the variable of a, then they're getting the value, he's getting the value 1000 because Nimesh changed the value, right? But Pragnesh defined that. So Pragnesh have access also, but someone else also have access to redefine that or define that also. So Nimesh in future they just decided okay, I want to change the money from 10 to 1000, so it is also possible. But after that the value of the current a is now become 1000 every time. In the function it is also like 1000, and after this function I call that a variable, also I am getting that same value 1000. So here's the let what you want to do. So now we are going to check how const works, right? So basically here I define const a is equal to 10, right? But suppose Pragnesh define that value 10, right? 10 price, let's suppose. Now he decided ki I never want to change this value to someone else and not giving the private, like not giving the access to changing this value. So it defines the const because const stands for constant variables, right? So Pragnesh here defined that const a is equal to 10, right? But someone else, suppose let's Nimesh, he's a guy, he's very ugly, he's a shop owner and he want to change, he's a like a your 50% ownership holds you. Okay, so basically Pragnesh defined the value of 10 price, right? And now someone else in future want to redefine that value. You want to redefine that value. Now if I put console log here inside that function, right? Now after that I will call that function, right? Here I'm forgetting w and just close it, and also I want to check here outside of that function what is the value of a. Now here Pragnesh defined that const variable, it means it can never be changed in the future, right? But someone else guy, some guy want to change this value from 10 to 10 like 100, right? but it can't do that. When I hit enter, it give me error like assignment to constraint variable. So the main difference is between let and const is that the let can be redefinable and const can't be redefinable. If you don't want to change your value further on in your code, so you just need to use that const variable. Otherwise, if you want to change your variable, like variable, if you want to like, let's suppose you assign a, let's suppose you created variable a using let. Now you want to rechange that value every time in that functional component, block scope, and like block scope, functional component, like functions in blocks. You want to change that value every time, so you just use that let variable. But if you don't want to like changing your value every time, so you just use that const, right? So that is the thing which we look at here. So in this video we check it that what is the difference between where, let and const. Where has a functional scope, as like, apart from this, let and const has block scope. So if I define that variable using where in function, so I'm only able to access that variable a inside that function, right? But what if I decided that where a is equal to 10 in block scope, right? What we are going to here, right here. So if I define that where variable in block scope, now I am able to access in that block scope, accessing that a variable, and also I am able to access that outside, right? And what is that let and where, let and const doing? If I define it that at the top level of the our code, if suppose let a is equal to 10, const b is equal to 20, at the top level we define it that. Now if someone like, if you want to access that at the bottom level of your code, you want to like print your const variable at the bottom level, and you define it that const a variable at the top level. Now you want to check what is the a variable value. Now you print like put your console log what is the value of a and comma, and you just use that a, right, like this. Now you're able to access that because you put that at the top level. It means it's global scope. So yeah, it's a global scope. You can also like check that value in functional, because it's global scope. You can access in functional scope as well as in block scope, right? What is the difference between let and const? As we define it, let can be redefinable and const can't be redefinable. If I use that const b is equal to 20, then I am not able to change that value, right? So that's the thing which we look at. And let can be redefinable. So yeah, that's all from the let, where and const versus we checked everything. This is my first video which I am shooting, so let's, please give me some feedbacks on this video, what I want to change and what I want to improve in the next videos. I'm not begging you for the like and comment. If you generally like this video, then please give me like, otherwise don't do that, because I think this video is not gonna be like perfect, I know that, but I really appreciate your efforts which you are like showing here. So yeah, that's all from my side. If you want to change, if you want to like give me comment like what I need to improve, what I need to like improvise in the next videos, then please do comment on this video. That really helpful for me. Okay then, not for bakchoris. Have a good day. Bye bye. Until the next video, man. Thank you.